Hi, AJ Hartley here, novelist, Shakespeare professor, fan of good TV. And today I'm going to be talking about the miniseries Suspicion. Before we get into the review itself, I'm talking about mysteries and thrillers because I write mysteries and thrillers, among other things. So if you haven't already checked out my stuff, please do so. There's a link in the description that will take you to my website, and you'll find all the books there by AJ Hartley and Andrew Hart, which is my other writing name. And I hope you find something there that you like.
Natalie Thompson. I know you've already been asked, but for the sake of the camera, are you sure you don't want legal representation?
I don't need it.
I can tell you that you've been arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to abduct Leo Newman.
No comment.
Nope.
There's obviously been some sort of misunderstanding.
We can't be certain whether this is terrorist-related, politically motivated, or simple extortion.
Young guy, Leo Newman, gets packed into a suitcase by a masked gang. NYPD flags 4 suspects.
Catherine Newman, I cannot imagine what you're going through at the moment.
I love my son, and I want him back.
We're being set up.
By us.
I don't know why. What do we have in common?
We're all British, and we were all in New York on the day Leo Newman was kidnapped.
Do we look like kidnappers to you?
What does a kidnapper look like?
You. Without any proof of our innocence, the damage is already done.
I can fix this.
You sure you know what you're doing?
No, but I can't go back.
Nobody buys me as a mother. I'll always be a CEO first.
Play it long. There's no other option. First page in the playbook.
Except I don't remember the chapter on the kidnap of your only child.
You're being asked to communicate in order to free your only child. These people want you to tell the truth.
We're getting deeper in. There is still a chance that people may understand everything you've done until now.
You have underestimated these people right from the beginning.
The truth will come out.
Suspicion, which was a British TV production made in 2021, released in 2022, and screened on Apple TV. The premise of the show is that there's a prominent kidnapping, the child of a powerful American ambassador to the UK, who's also the head of some sort of marketing corporation. The boy is abducted, caught on camera in a hotel by 4 people wearing masks of the royal family. There's then an investigation both in the US and in the UK in which these 4 people are identified, arrested, interrogated and monitored as they try to put together a case. And these are ordinary people whose lives get sort of turned upside down by being implicated in this particular crime. And of course, we as viewers don't know who, if any of them, are actually guilty of real involvement. One is a university professor. One is a woman who's about to get married. There's a guy who's of Indian heritage who is having family issues and trying to sort of redefine himself professionally. There's a university student, and there's another guy who it quickly turns out is, sort of a villain of various kinds, who's adept at changing his identity and operating according to various nefarious practices. And, it's one of those stories that I think the premise is really interesting because it's that ordinary people thrown into extraordinary situations kind of model. So it has that John Buchan 39 Steps or North by Northwest kind of story, which I generally like. And I have written stories like this. But they are challenging because you're dealing with a crime thriller in which the suspects also become kind of investigators. And that's always a tricky thing to do, particularly when it's set in the present, when law enforcement is so professionalized. And it's tricky because it starts to strain credibility. And this is where this particular show, I think, comes apart. The cast is mostly solid. The person who gets the sort of top billing is Uma Thurman, though she's not in it that much, especially early on, though she becomes more central to it later on. And she's mostly a kind of semi-animated waxwork as an actor. I don't think this is particularly impressive from her. The most interesting casting choice to me was Kunal Nayyar, who plays Adesh Chopra, and who a lot of people will know from The Big Bang Theory. And it was great to see him doing something like this, where he gets to play an actual person with an inner life, as opposed to a kind of cartoon character reliant on a racial stereotype. So it was nice to see him in this. One of the issues, the show has a number of strange features. It's set both in London, mostly, also other areas of the UK, but mostly London, and in New York. But the New York stuff is never completely convincing. A lot of the actors surrounding Uma Thurman are clearly British actors doing American accents, and that's a slightly odd choice. The dialect work is okay, but not entirely convincing. And as sometimes happens when you have actors doing something that requires a lot of focus on craft, the characterization tends to get flattened out. So there's so much effort going into this particular feature of, in this case, voice, that you don't get a lot of personality. But it's also an odd choice. It makes me think that a lot of the show was not filmed in New York at all. Every time they go into an area in New York, the scene quickly turns into a set in a particular room, which makes me think it's not actually there. Does this matter? Probably not. And I think that there was some issues with COVID. I think the shooting got interrupted by the pandemic, and that messed things about, and maybe changed the way that this had to be filmed. But there's something else about the show that doesn't feel right to me, not least that there's a representation of the US, which to me is very British and not terribly convincing. As I say, the plot hinges on the kidnapping of this prominent kid, or the child of a prominent family. And it leads to all these protests. It becomes this massive issue in the news, and leads to a kind of social movement, which to me is never completely credible, not least because this is the kind of thing that might happen in the UK but wouldn't happen in the US, because I can't see this kind of focus from the population on the abduction of a wealthy white kid. It would be a curiosity rather than something that galvanizes a youth movement in pursuit of social justice issues and other kinds of law. I don't want to give too much away about the ending, but it just doesn't ring true to me. This is very much a British story. That question of plausibility, I think, dogs the whole show. It goes out of its way to establish the real lives of these characters at the beginning, and does so quite convincingly. And then it kind of abandons that as the story becomes more and more outlandish, and there are plot twists and plot developments which really strain believability. I don't know how these people are crossing through customs and such, carrying firearms and various other things. They don't make sense to me at all. I just can't believe it. And this is the problem. It's like, if they were law enforcement people, then you wouldn't give it a second thought. But the fact that the show goes out of its way to make them ordinary people then struggles with the very premise that it's set up. And the story becomes increasingly preposterous, and there is a sort of mounting body count to which nobody seems to pay much attention. And after a while, the unbelievability of the thing, combined with the fact that the central characters are not especially likable, that for all the attempt to make them feel real, most of what you get from them is a kind of random self-interest, a kind of a weird narcissism that I find powerfully annoying and makes the sort of motivation really bizarre and sketchy and hard to follow some of the time. Not in terms of story. I understand what's going on. I just don't really believe that they would do the things that they do. And by the end, I just didn't care what happened to them. I didn't even really care who was really behind what was going on or whether all things were as they seemed to be or not. The show, it was one of those twist after twist after twist shows where you can't help feeling like we're making this up on the fly and it doesn't finally completely add up. And maybe it sort of does, it sort of ties together at the end, but by then I had lost interest. I watched the whole thing, so you don't have to. I shouldn't say that. That's always such a glib thing for people to say, but it did not deliver. I was quite disappointed, and by the end, I was not interested at all. There are better things out there. I would not particularly invest in this, which is too bad because, you know, at the beginning, it did look like it was going to be interesting. But I started to feel like the show went out of its way to create these people and give them lives and then kind of ignored it and turned them into game pieces that were being moved around by the writers in ways that didn't make any kind of sense at all. So, no, sorry, miss. That's it. As ever, please like, comment, subscribe. If there are shows you would particularly like me to talk about, let me know in the comments and we will take it from there. Thank you to my patrons. Please check out my books and I will talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.